Good evening, everyone. Welcome to, I don't know why I'm being a robot. Welcome to episode number 64 of Restitching the Tapestry. My name is Donny Winter, and I am joined by my co-host tonight, Sherri Archer. Ari is not able to be with us this evening, though they are here in spirit, as always. And we are joined today by my wonderful friend and soul sister, Cindy, who goes by Streamofawareness on
Hi,
YouTube.
guys.
Hello, Cindy. It's good to see you.
Hello.
So
Hello.
happy to have you here.
Oh my God.
It's gonna be a hoot, I know. So of course, like I want to do some introductions to begin things, and I want to talk a little bit about like the origin of our friendship a little bit. So Cindy and I have been friends for like 15 years.
Wow.
We met originally through a Godzilla message board where we both bonded over Godzilla fan fiction, and our friendship began, and then it just continued to grow and grow and grow. We really bonded a lot over talking about mental health, our bullying experiences that we had survived, a whole variety of different things. And truthfully, Cindy, you have kept me sane for many years.
Oh,
Oh, well, I'm glad that I've been able to reciprocate that in some way. So before we get started with our topic tonight, which is autism acceptance, I wanted to just go through and all of us share what we've been up to and how we've been doing. So Sherri, do you want to start us out? How have you been doing? What have you been up to?
It's been a week of highs and lows, hasn't it? I had a weird, I don't want to get it too in the weeds on this, but I had a weird, like, police stop by my house for some reason the other day. It was very, very strange and like middle of the night kind of stuff, saying that I had called 911 on my neighbor, which I didn't, and I don't have a home phone. So it was very bizarre. Oh, and I didn't tell you this, Donnie, like the cop that I was talking to looked a little bit like Brandon Fraser from the 90s. So it was a little distracting and I was having a hard time focusing.
I
I
would have
know.
too.
Like, I think I'm going to need a strip search. Maybe I did call. I'll find my phone. Anyway, so there was that. And it was like really disarming. But then in class the other day, I had a student compliment me on my lecture. And so I didn't know what to do with that either. It's just been a weird week of highs and lows. I was like, thanks. It's like my brain was short circuiting. You know, it came up to the podium and was like, I just want to thank you for the lecture today. It was really good. And by the way, it's my
a
worst
compliment.
right? Like, what do you mean? No complaints? You don't need help with your essay? I don't understand what you're saying to me.
Oh my goodness.
Normal life for me.
It's a weird week.
How about you, Cindy? How have you been? What have you been up to?
Well, I've been, my church choir has been back since September. We do wear masks, so it's not like we're like spreading COVID everywhere. We're being very careful. But I've mostly been doing pretty much the same thing I've been doing for a long time, which is taking care of my dad, who has very advanced Parkinson's. And like I said, getting back into singing into my choir. And, but most of my time is taken up with dealing with my dad. And I don't know if my mom and dad are watching this right now. I don't think they are, but maybe they are. But, I've always wanted to do this. I'm on TV.
Cheers to parents.
Cheers.
Clink.
Cheers. I promise water.
Mine's tea. This time, at least. For me, this week has been full of highs and lows as well. Mental health wise, I've been at a solid 9, which is like really good.
Great.
School's been going well. My partner and I are making preliminary plans to move in the next 3 months. So we are kind of just like navigating details with regard to that, because we all know that moving is stressful. It's not going to be like super far away. It's like a town over basically, but yeah, we're wanting to like move, and then we're gonna use that time renting this new place to like house hunt for like a forever home. That'll give us time for us to let the housing market kind of calm itself a little bit, because it's really, really bad right now. So but otherwise I'm dandy as a dandelion. So joining us this evening in the chat, we have RB, we have Panda Alsatian, we have Leo, We have, let's see, Shayna is here. Hello, Shayna, darling. Lagiakris is here. Hello, my friend. And Sophia's here. We have a really lovely turnout. It's awesome to have all of you here tonight.
Hey, everybody.
So, yeah, it's great to have you here. So, per the usual, before we get on to talking about our topic, I'm going to go through the show's mission statement first. Okay. So, oh crap, let me get to the mission statement. One moment. I didn't have it scrolled up, and I probably should have it memorized at this point.
While you're pulling that up, I'm going to say shout out to Panda because he is listening today through his brand new hearing aids.
Oh, congratulations,
how exciting is
Panda. That is amazing. Congrats.
Yay. Deaf applause. I just happen to know that.
Oh, I love. Oh, and Elmo and Slappy Squirrel Fanatic 2001 is here. Welcome to our stream tonight. It's good to see you. So here is the mission statement. We live in a dynamic society where social media shapes us by creating greater opportunities for connection. It has led to a developing understanding of the adversity many marginalized communities face, the powers causing the adversity, and those who act as bystanders as atrocities take place in real time. Our goal with this show is to make connections and have challenging conversations about topics, current events, pop culture, and art. Together, let's weave the threads of understanding with what privilege we have in order to learn, educate, and create in a world that's growing. Okay. So, Lagiakris said, as a person who's on the autism spectrum, I must listen in, and thankfully I was able to make it too. We're really happy to have you here. Leo says, it's been a roller coaster week, but hey, I found a big chunk of green calcite at Home Goods. I could live in Home Goods, honestly. And basically, Shayna says, I followed Cindy and been friends with her for about a decade. In fact, Shayna, didn't I meet you through Cindy, I think? I'm fairly sure I did. We've all kind of like created like our own little like family. I love it. It makes me so happy. Oh my God, Wiley. Yay. I love him. So, Cindy, this is going to be your opportunity to tell us your history. So I want you to, like, you are an autistic advocate and activist. And that I think is so unbelievably empowering. So, like, could you describe your journey for us as you've grown into this over the years?
Well, I was born in 1980, so I call myself an old fart. I'm at 41 years old right now. I will turn 42 in July. I know I don't look it. People, when I ask people guess my age and they don't know, they guess anywhere between 14 and 28. They never go above 30 for some reason. I mean, what's up with you people? But I've always looked younger, and I used to hate it. But now it's like, well, I could just shock them with the real number. But if I had been born a cisgender boy instead of a cisgender girl, there is no doubt I would have been diagnosed as autistic by the time I was 4 or 5 years old. And if we knew the things about autism that we know now, back then when I was a kid, I might have been diagnosed sooner. But thanks to this whole idea that autism is a boy thing only, it took till I was 15 years old to get diagnosed. So that was 1995. So, I was already in high school by the time. But I showed autistic traits when I was a baby and when I was, all through my life. But I showed them as a baby. This is what my mom has told me, is that when I was a baby, I didn't like to make eye contact. I would cry if people would pick me up and hold me. And I would totally freak out at noises like the vacuum cleaner or music on the radio if it was too loud. And when I started to walk, I was a little human pinball. I was running everywhere. And somehow, when I was 3 years old, I toilet trained myself in a single day. This is before I could remember, because my first memory is when I was 4. So, but I somehow did this. And so I didn't know how to behave when I was a little kid, you know, and I only had a few friends growing up because of this. And I didn't understand why people would like me and then all of a sudden just not like me.
Mm.
You know, people wouldn't explain what I was doing wrong. They just sort of would start ostracizing me. And from my point of view, it came out of nowhere. And that was really hard. And I never really got an explanation for what did I do? Why are you all mad at me all of a sudden? You know, that's what it was like all the time. And they'd be like, we don't want to play with you anymore. Like that was. And my mom suspected for my entire childhood that something was different about me, you know, especially when I had a stretch of 3 years in my life from like, I think it was age 8 to 11. I'm not sure. I did not grow at all. Like my growth just stopped for a period. And then I did hit a growth spurt eventually, but I was 4 feet tall for like 3 years. And then finally you know, my puberty, I guess, decided to kick in and I'm 5'1" now, but I was tiny compared to my peers for a very, very, very long time. I looked like a first grader when I was in sixth grade. I mean, like, you know, I spent most of my childhood in psychologists' office, in doctors' offices, in labs, you know, getting blood drawn and getting imaged and getting tests and stuff. You know, I was poked and prodded and examined and looked at and talked to and everything under the sun. And these doctors were misdiagnosing me with all kinds of things. I can't even remember what they all were. Like, I know one was like oppositional defiant disorder, which no. And another one tried to tell my mom that, well, maybe you're just a bad parent. And she picked me up and she walked out of that office and she slammed the door. She was so pissed.
Good for her.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
You know, because seriously, and, you know, and it was a clinical psychologist who, you know, this is when I was, you know, starting to deal with a whole lot of bullying in high school that, you know, put it all together. And I started getting all these testing things. And it was like the testing I would get in special ed class every so often with that big blue book. They'd stand up, you know, if you've been to special ed, you know, and I'm sure there's audience people out there going, yep. And I had to do it for weeks. And I didn't know what it was for. You know, I thought, are they trying to make sure that I'm like, not like gonna go kill everybody or something? You know, because I didn't understand what the testing was for. But after all that testing, I was diagnosed as autistic. And the thing is that I didn't grasp what autism meant because I only knew one girl that had that word ascribed to her. Her name was Hannah. And she was, you know, she had more support needs than I did. So my only image of autism in my childhood at that time was somebody who was kind of spacey and would just kind of barely talk sometimes. And then, and here's the thing, is that all through my childhood, I knew I was different from my peers. I just didn't know why or how. But I recognized that I was different, you know, not just physically, because I mean, part of autism for me was that it affected the way I grew and developed. I mean, I didn't get a figure like girls, you know, my age do. I mean, I'm tiny and skinny, got toothpick arms and legs, and that's just how I've always been. But the women on my mom's side of the family run tiny like this too. So it's part genetics, but it's also part autism. Ugh. But I was bullied severely. I've talked about it before, but I was bullied severely in the 90s, both for my autistic traits and also because, like I said, I didn't develop like other girls my age, you know, and I actually went to school. I started wearing like a padded bra because I was so ashamed of my body because they taught me that, oh, you're flat, you're ugly, you're stupid, and just, I don't want to repeat the R slur, but I was called that every day. I had a guy that threatened to rape and murder me every day. And the counselors would say, oh, he's just being a boy. You know, boys are being boys. You know, boys do that. He's probably got a crush on you. Just ignore it. And
That is terrible.
This is after I tried to ignore it and it wouldn't stop. Now, grad night, when we were graduating, he gave me a cup of like Coca-Cola soda. And it smelled bad. So, because he was saying, oh, this is the truth. But I took the Coke and I went, this smells really bad. What's in there? Did you poison it? And I threw it at him and I ran away. Years later, I smelled that smell. It was vodka. Okay, I am a very cheap drunk, and you know I've gotten white girl drunk before at a choir party. If I drank that soda, I would have been unconscious. And we were out by the pool. Who knows what he would have done? What this kid would have done? Oh, but he's just a boy, just playing around, right? Boys
Yeah.
will be boys. Yeah, rape culture, sure. But anyway, but it was because of the bullying that I started trying to mask my autistic traits, because the message I got when I tried to say, hey, people are bullying me, it's, well, just stop being so weird and they won't have a reason to bully you. So I tried to mask and tried to not stim. Because I'm a stimmy autistic, and I had to relearn how to do it because I buried it. I would sit on my hands in class so that I wouldn't like do my little hands thingies that, they're out of frame, but my hands are almost always wiggling, or I'm holding a tangle or something. But I masked for probably 20 something years, I think. Pretty close to when I turned 30. Now, in my 20s, I started to unmask a bit in private because I had started to learn about autism and what it meant. And I was trying to figure myself out. But masking is detrimental to autistic people's mental health. It's just is damaging. It leads us to have breakdowns and stuff like that. So I'm glad that I didn't experience that too badly. Sorry, I got a cat hair in my mouth.
You're good.
It happens.
So this was the 90s, right? That
the
most
90s
of this
into
was
the
happening.
2000s. So, I'm, like I said, I masked into my 20s, and I started unmasking, privately in my 20s. And into my 30s, I started to take the mask off. And it was around the time that I started spreading my Affirmations for Bullying Victims message, which was spurred on by when Amanda Todd took her life. Because I'm like, oh my God, why are people so mean? Because I saw what was said to her. I found some of the stuff that was said, and I see people do it every day, even now on Tumblr, and it's terrible. But that's when I started unmasking, and I started my Tumblr on January 1st, 2014, I think it was. Twitter was sooner. 2013, I think, was my Twitter account. And then Tumblr, I went to later. And that's the time that I took off my mask and kept it off. So it's not like I became more autistic. It's that I just stopped hiding it. I own my awkwardness. Awkward is my sexy.
May I just commend you for that? Like, how amazing is that? Like, you saw this as an opportunity, to be more yourself rather than a fear factor where it's like, oh, I need to hide more. Like, good for you for seeing that opportunity and for feeling comfortable in being yourself. That's amazing. I think they made me a little teary. Like, we all need to be able to find those opportunities, right? And see that as like there's no point in my hiding myself, and there's no point in my masking, like you said, because all that's going to do is just give more permission to the bullies. All that's doing is rewarding their behavior, right? And good for you for seeing that. Congratulations.
Yeah, and I want to echo what you just said, Sherri. Like, I mean, I've known you for 15 years, Cindy, and I have watched you grow more than any person I've ever seen in my entire life. And it's been a growth into confidence, into being a voice for people. And that to me is the most empowering thing ever, because you've spent so long having people minimize you and invalidate you. To be able to switch that narrative like that, that's astronomically amazing, in my opinion.
Because the way I see it, I'm a survivor of bullying and emotional abuse, but I don't want to go into too many details about, because one of the people that did it could be, present. So I don't know. But I've been through hell, and I came out the other side, and I've just decided, you know what? I'm going to carry a bucket of water. It's probably my own tears, but I'm going to carry that bucket of water, and I'm going to pour it on people who are coming out behind me, because I feel like my purpose in life is to tell people that they don't have to walk this path alone, and the fire's not going to burn forever, because I can't prevent them from walking through it, and I can't prevent them from catching on fire themselves, but I can make sure they're not alone in it, and I can make sure that there's something to soothe it and to put it out when they come out of it, but I just see myself as I'm a geek who loves music, because, I mean, if you put on Josh Groban, I'm going to tell everybody to shut up. They're like, shh, Josh is on, and I love Godzilla, and I love astronomy, and hey, I found Donny because of Godzilla, and, I'm always grateful for that. So, like,
I always tell people that I wouldn't be a writer or a teacher without you either, because truthfully though, like, I was at a very vulnerable point in my life when we met, and that validation that I received from you went as far as like directing me down that path, if that makes sense. So
yeah, it does. And I remember, I don't know, Donnie, if I was the first person you came out to or one of the first, but I just remember you worrying about it because I'm Catholic, you know, and I don't hide the fact that I'm Catholic. I'm not like super religious, you're all going to hell stuff, but I'm like, you know what you do in the bedroom, it's not a big deal. I don't think God's going to condemn that. You know, it's what you do to other people. If you're mean to other people, I don't think God likes that, but that's just my opinion. And it's like, if you're gay, you're gay. So what? That's cool. It's not like you got a brain tumor. I mean,
well, see,
you were people that have brain tumors, though.
You were the first person who I told and the first person who accepted it. So that right there, like that gesture, you know, was significant to have at that point. So
oh my gosh.
I do want to touch on Shayna's comment, because Shayna just commented saying masking is horrible. I've been forced to mask most of my life, and still to this day. Now at 30, I purposely defy the demand to mask.
Good for you.
That's
you
good.
Go, girl.
Good for you, Shayna.
Yeah. You tell him.
So, Cindy, was there any other aspects that you wanted to discuss? Because I know I kind of like interrupted. I apologize. In talking about your journey.
Well, you know, just the fact that I feel like it's just been kind of a fight to be who I am, and you know, to deal with the crap that I've dealt with, and just, you know, sometimes when I look back, it shocks me that it's like, wow, those are some of the worst days of my life, and I'm still here. And like, cause like I legit attempted to end my life due to bullying, you know, I don't know how much detail I'm allowed to go into about it, but it was after 3 girls shoved my head in a toilet, and they were trying to drown me in a school toilet. And like, you know, they were sitting on me and they were flushing it. And, you know, like my vision was going black, and I was kicking and fighting, and I was still fighting. And just when I was going to give up and be like, okay, this is what I deserve, I'm a piece of crap. They've obviously told me that. And then a teacher came in. She didn't know what was going on, but they all jumped off me, and they're like, oh, she was being sick and we're trying to help. You know, my hair's wet and a mess and everything. And I just went with it because, you know, as soon as they let me up, I started throwing up because, you know, toilets are dirty, right? So it was just a reflex. I got sick in the toilet, and, you know, I just went with their story. And so the teacher helped me get to the office and called my mom, and I told her, I'm throwing up, Mom, I need to come home. And I just made up I think I made up an excuse about why my hair was wet. It was like I got sick on it and I tried to wash it out with the water or something. I don't remember what I said, and when my mom brought me home, she had to run errands, and that's when I tried to do it. And this is where God comes into this for me, because I had a mouthful of pills, you know. I had a mouthful of Benadryl because I thought if I take this, it'll put me to sleep and I'll stop breathing and that'll be it. And I had the water in my hand, and I was like, God, if you don't want me, you make me spit these pills out. And guess what happened? Pills all over the place. I sneezed. There was no itch in my nose. It's like God just went, Cindy, what are you doing? Don't do that. You know, when you make your kids spit out a bug. You know, I see the humor in it, but it's dark humor. But like, that started me on the road towards Catholicism because, you know, I chose that. So I started going to church with my mom in my 20s. Let's see, if we hadn't had COVID and I'd been at church in 2021, it would have been my 20-year anniversary of joining the church. But I don't want to get too religious because I know that makes some people uncomfortable, and I respect that. But
this is a space where you can be free to be yourself, honey.
but it's just the fact that I survived that moment, you know, it boggles me now just to think of the place that I was in mentally. So when I hear about what happened to Amanda Todd, and I just think of what she was feeling, it breaks my heart because I know what that black hole feels like.
Yeah.
But, you know, Stephen Hawking said that black holes aren't as black as we paint them because of Hawking radiation. You know, 2 particles are creating and come together and they annihilate. But if they happen around a black hole, well, they form, one falls in, the other goes out. And so I feel like I'm Hawking radiation. I made it out. And I want other people to come out too.
I love that analogy.
So that's why there's my anti-bullying message, because I don't want anybody else sitting in the dark like that. It's like, start climbing. you can get out. Start climbing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and you grew up in a time where like it was just so under discussed. And I think
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately that mass ignorance with regard to neurodiversity
Mm-hmm.
just almost gave permission for people to just
Yeah.
be terrible. At least that's how they would justify it.
Like, I'm a decade older than you, Cindy, and so I get like that whole idea, like when we were kids growing up, like, you know, there was the weird kid in the corner that nobody talked to, and that was
Mhm.
it. Nobody, there was no explanation for it. There was no like, maybe there's something going on, right? And then like, what did that movie come out like in the 90s? Then you had Rain Man, and so that was your one vision of what autism looked like, right? Like this, yeah, right? Like that was, so that's like in the public consciousness. And so that's what everybody thinks when you say that word for the longest time. Now I think that's changing. But for the longest time, like that was, you know, the vision everybody had in their head. And it's like, and I just, that's when
Yep.
you said, like, you know, when people say autism, you know, they think, you know, that it's just this one thing. Like that's what I got in my head. I'm like, that's where people get that from, right? Is this movie that became this huge blockbuster. So yeah, it's, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just feel for you because it's just, you know, it's just so much, and so much of that changes us and hangs with us. And I hear a lot of this, and you probably hear this more than I do, but I hear a lot of this like, oh, you know, now everybody's autistic, you know, it's the big excuse, right? Like people on the right like to say that. And
Mhm.
I think we're just diagnosing it more, right? I think that's always
That's exactly what's happening.
yeah, we're just better at diagnosing it, and we're understanding it more. And we're
Yeah,
understanding that it's a
also,
spectrum, right?
Yeah.
yeah, and also there are adults that they have autistic children and they're finding out they are autistic themselves because it can be genetic. You
Right.
know, both of my parents are neurodivergent. You know, my mom has ADHD. My dad, I'm pretty sure he was kind of an ADHD, and then he kind of got better as he got older. You know, he kind of grew out of it a bit, or maybe he just got better at controlling it. But my mom drinks coffee from the second she's awake till the second she goes to bed because it does for her what Ritalin would do for a kid. You know, she grew up self-medicating on coffee because,
Yeah.
you know, she was drinking coffee when she was a kid because
Sure.
it calmed her down.
Yeah. I mentioned to you before we started, before we got online or got live today, I'd mentioned to Cindy, to everybody in the chat, that my partner is on the spectrum. He's neurodivergent, and he didn't really find out until, and so I'm a decade older than you. He's a decade older than me. He didn't find out until maybe 10 years ago.
Wow.
So imagine being in your 40s, right? Getting into your 50s and just starting to kind of figure this out. Like, that's why I've not made connections so well in the past. That's why I have all these issues. That's why. And he and I were friends before we started dating. And we actually had an issue where some of my girlfriends felt uncomfortable around him because they thought he was creepy and they thought he was like awkward and, you know, and like staring at their boobs and stuff. And I was like paying attention to his body language. And I was like, he has this thing where he just like looks in kind of mid space when he's talking. And I'm like, he's not looking at your boobs. He's thinking about what he's saying. He's like concentrating on his words so he doesn't sound weird. You know what I mean? Like he's trying to connect. I'm like, there's just so much miscommunication that happens, right?
It's really frustrating because, you know, like, you know, autistic people, our body language might be a little different
Right.
than our typical body language. And it's also, it might be when we try to mimic yours, we might do it slightly out of time, and that might trigger uncanny valley for some people for some reason.
Right.
So like, I don't know, but it's
yeah.
So before we move on to the next question, I do want to touch on a few of the comments that we've been getting as well. So Lagiakra says, I was bullied a bit too, but I didn't let them get to me. I fought back. And though I had to get violent a few times, it was necessary because nobody messed with me again after 2015. I'm really glad that you were in a situation where you could stand up for yourself and that it was successful for you. Because it's like bullying has so many variables to it. Like I can tell you from personal experience that the instances where I tried standing up for myself actually made it worse for me.
Yeah.
Because it kind of egged on the bullies, let's just say. I don't know if for either of you if it was that way as well, but like it there's just so many variables, you know. But I'm really glad though, Lagiakris, that you got through that.
In my case, I got punished for defending myself because, you know, the bullies, they would do something so the teacher would come around right in time to see me retaliate. And I'd be like, but she started. I don't care. I saw you hitting and cussing, so you're going to the office. And so I was always in trouble while they would just walk away.
And I think it's different for women too, because again, there's the whole boys will be boys, but girls are supposed to be a certain way.
We're supposed to shut up and take it, but no. No. No.
Yep.
God, that's so unsettling. Oh my goodness.
It really is.
Arpy says there's also Sia's movie that was so awful that Autism Speaks wouldn't touch it. Didn't Sia work with Autism Speaks briefly on it?
Oh God, I have a whole section down below in the autism representation part. If when we get to that,
yeah, we'll get to that in a moment. But that's a good point to make, Arpy.
Yes.
Leo says we're diagnosing more because it's more identifiable due to it being more accepted in today's society. The far right complains only because they are riddled with ableism. It's true, 100%.
Word.
Oh, and Leo adds, plus they don't like it because it means they lose money. Money talks, unfortunately, yes.
True.
And agreed, Lagiakris. Fighting back can be a double-edged sword depending on the situation for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I only got in a fight one time, and what I did was I got behind the girl and I grabbed her hair by the scalp and I yanked her head backwards. So she was going like this, but she could not turn around to get me but I got in trouble for starting it when she was the one swinging. I got behind her and grabbed her hair so she couldn't swing at me. You know, I was... But at least she got detention too that time.
Right. Yeah. For me, when it came to defending myself, I was just so little. Like, I wasn't going to be doing anything to a football player. Like, I would like maybe hit them and they'd be like, oh, a mosquito bite. Okay. And then I'd get thrown or something. It's like, you know, that it just didn't work for me.
Seriously? Throwing you? I don't want to throw them. Can you just imagine tiny little 5'1", 80-pound me just picking up a football player and just throwing him through?
I would pay to be a fly on that wall. 1000%. So so I think you've touched on it a little bit here and there, but let's delve a little bit more into navigating spaces. Okay. So when it comes to navigating spaces as an autistic individual, what do people outside of the autistic community often overlook?
Well, brace yourselves, because this is where I wrote like the diatribe stuff down.
We are ready to learn.
You ready for this? Okay. Brace yourselves.
My loins are girded.
First off, listen to autistic people of color. You know, Black autistic people are especially vulnerable to abuse and misdiagnosis, and they have the most to fear from like the police. Yeah. Okay, if I have a meltdown in front of the police, the most they might do is tackle me if they do anything at all, because I'm a fairly non-threatening, tiny little white girl, okay? But a tall Black guy that's broad-shouldered and really buff, you know, because some of them, they can be built like football players. You know, if he's having a meltdown, he's screaming, he's pounding himself on the head, or he's running around throwing things, you know, the police are going to just shoot him. Because they're going to see that he's not complying with the orders to get on the ground, you know, put your hands up. That doesn't work that way during a meltdown. You know, because trying to ask somebody to follow orders during a meltdown is like trying to tell a tornado to stop spinning. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So Black Lives Matter is especially true for Black autistic people. But listen to autistic people of color applies to brown and indigenous autistic people too. Because unfortunately, there are white autistic advocates who inadvertently, I stress inadvertently, speak over autistic people of color. So I try to do my part and boost autistic and disabled people of color when I can. You know, like I will not comment unless I go, oh, wow, listen to this. But usually I will try to boost it without comment. You know, I'll tag it like, hey, listen, you know, stuff like that. So, but like, you know, but autistic people of color are really, really vulnerable. They're even more vulnerable than white autistic people in that sense because, you know, they're seen as more like misbehaving bad kids. You know, I was seen that way as a kid because maybe it was because I was a girl. I don't know. But even as teenagers and older, they're still treated as if they're just bad people instead of, you know what, maybe there's a diagnosis and we need to change our approach. Instead, it's no, let's lock them up.
Yeah, that's such an important message. I appreciate you saying that, right? Like Kimberly Crenshaw wrote about intersectionality, right? That's what you're talking about. It's that intersection of all of those things. I'm not just a woman. I'm not just a person of color, but now also I'm autistic. Like all of these things are working against me, right? All of these things are against this person, right? Or, you know, I'm a big, large, you know, man of color, and I'm in this society that's inherently racist, and a lot of it's, you know, social standings and a lot of the, you know, everything that's going on. And like, you know, like there's that intersectionality too. So absolutely. Like, thank you for saying that, for amplifying those voices.
Yeah. And before you continue really quick, Lucky Acris makes a great point in saying, I'm of Mexican descent on the autism spectrum, have ADHD and demisexual. Where do I fit into this? And I think that question itself is significant, right?
Right.
Because there are so many intersections that privileged voices just steamroll over, and they don't realize that they're doing so.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, as for the rest, this can apply to, you know, autistic people from all backgrounds, ethnicities, races, whatever. So, you know, I'm going to use the word we a lot, but I mean that more like a nebulous sense. I'm not speaking for everyone. I'm trying to speak with everyone. And there's probably a lot that would agree and maybe some that won't. But I'm not trying to say we as in autism is a monolith. So just a disclaimer. So I think a big issue is that non-autistic parents of autistic kids still struggle to see their child as a whole human person with all the emotions and all the things that come with being human. Because autism is not a shell around a person. It is the person. It is an integral part of them as much as their skin color. So autism parents, and I mean autism parents as in like the parents that are just really ableist and terrible about this, is that they pathologize every aspect of their child's behavior. Play becomes therapy. It's a battle to get their child to look, sound, and act as normal as possible.
Yeah.
And they focus so single-mindedly on their child's autism and how it makes their child different, rather than seeing them as a person feeling the same emotions that we all feel. So, a famous example is the autistic meltdown that everyone dreads. Even autistic people, we dread having meltdowns. They're not fun. They're not something we do. But meltdowns are a feeling. They are a feeling, and behavior comes from that feeling. When you're sad, you cry, right? When you're autistic and you have a meltdown, you lose control of what you're feeling and sometimes of what you're doing. Some autistic people, they may crush their muscles really hard and hold it in, and they shed tears and they're crying, but their body is going. Their adrenaline is up. I mean, it's there. And if you focus only on the behavior, when a meltdown is happening, the person gets lost, and that's dehumanizing. And what autistic people in a state of meltdown need, it varies from person to person, but generally it's pretty universal that what we need is for you to remove all the demands from us, because you can't put info in when we can't take it in. You know, it's like if you're offering me cake when I'm throwing up, I'm going to look at you like you're disgusting and get away from me, right?
Yeah.
Because a meltdown when you're autistic is like throwing up. It's involuntary. Once it starts, you can't stop it. It's just got to go. And another thing to do is either try to calm the environment down or move us somewhere that's calmer and quieter, because a lot of us don't like to do this in public, you know, if we can help it. You know, standing there and yelling at us to stop it and quit it is not going to make us stop. We need you to model calm. Even if you're scared and you're terrified and I'm like pounding my head with my fist and there's blood going everywhere, you just got to be like, okay, we're okay. Let's just go somewhere quiet. Because if you're like, Cindy, stop it, does that make you feel very calm? Stop it. You can't do that. But you know, even just avoiding eye contact with me and let's go somewhere else. That's a whole different message than stop it. Because I will sponge up what you're feeling and it will make it worse and worse, and I will just escalate and it will just go on.
It sounds like what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's almost like a state of overstimulation.
It is. It can be, exactly. Overstimulation, even overwhelming emotions can sometimes cause it. You know, because emotions create visceral feelings in me. My feelings are very visceral. And sometimes they just come on so suddenly that, you know, what might seem like a little thing to you is a really big thing to me. Like I drop my water bottle and I'm like, oh my God, why did this happen? Oh my God, my entire day is ruined. And it's just water on the floor. But because I'm already in a state of nervousness, like maybe I was waiting for the live stream to come on and I want to be ready and perfectly in order and ready to go, and then something screws it up. You know, I have grown up in an environment of being punished for not being able to perform, you know, to someone else's standard. And it didn't matter if it wasn't my fault that thing didn't work out. So, like, when things go wrong, I panic because, oh my gosh, I cannot get what they want. And, like, I've been working on trying to stop myself from doing that. But, you know, when it comes to meltdowns, I do have videos of meltdowns on my channel of my own. But the thing is that I put them there by myself on my choice. It was my choice to put them there. And I recorded them myself. And the reason I put them there is so somebody would be gawking at me and not the little 5-year-old that can't tell you no and didn't get a choice. You know, I'm choosing to put that out there to show that, hey, us adults that seem articulate, we have them too. Because I will hit myself, you know, and I will bite and cry and scream and yell and sometimes swear, which is not very nice, but but it's just parents will put their children out there when they're in that state of just complete distress. And they're like, this is what I have to deal with. This is autism. And no, my life is not all meltdowns. And when you paint that picture and when every parent has that video out there, that's the message that this is what autism is. And then there's the stigma. You know, and it's like poor Jesus getting nailed to that cross, except it's autistic people. And, you know, and you got those nails just going in. And when we try to speak out about it, you know, people start being like, well, you're not severe like my child. And it's like, I know exactly what your child is feeling right now because I've been there. And it's not nice. And I don't want that on the internet. You know, if someone else were to film me having a meltdown and they put it up, I would be suing them to take it down. If I want to put it up, that's fine. But if someone else puts it up, it's like, what are you doing? So
it's like, I mean, as a bullying survivor, like public humiliation, I would argue is one that really sits with people. Like it you won't forget that it happens. And I think for autistic people, like it becomes more insidious public humiliation because, like you were saying, like if you don't have control on the moment and people are intentionally making a spectacle out of you, like that will cause problems after the actual event.
And if it's on the internet for everybody to see, even years later, you know, that will haunt you forever. And, you know, this thing about broadcasting, I think it's starting to get better, but it still happens and it's a problem. But I want to move on because I don't want to sit and talk about meltdowns all day long because I could do it all night and I'll just get frustrating for me.
Yeah.
But I swear that there are some parents that just forget that their kids are human, like I said. But it's like, we're not problems to solve. You know, we're people with needs just like anybody else. You know, I mean, autistic kids, we do things that are kind of embarrassing, gross, messy, frustrating. But I swear there are parents that are out there that act like their child is a wild animal to break instead of a human being to teach. And like, because, if you have a non-speaking autistic child, because non-speaking autistic people communicate, it's just the matter of receiving what that means is not always there. Communication is two-way. It's not just I do a thing and then, well, there's no meaning to that. No, there's meaning. If a non-speaking autistic child learns that they have to be aggressive to get their needs met, they're going to bite and scream because that works. It's not because they're an uncontrollable brat. What happened in that child's life to get them thinking that that's how their needs need to be met? I mean, it probably wasn't intentional, but still, what happened there?
You blew my mind with your child is, what did you say? Your child is not a wild animal to be tamed, but a child to be taught. You blew my mind with that. That is so beautiful.
That was an amazing, quotable forever. It has been
For real.
immortalized.
For real. I want that tattooed on my arm. Like, that is beautiful. Good Lord. Blew my mind.
Yeah, but like, because, as human beings, we all want to stay like fed, hydrated, rested, listened to, and comfortable. And there's discord when one or more of those needs aren't being met. So you see what I mean? And autistic kids and autistic adults, even, especially autistic adults who like are total care and like they cannot make their communication understandable, but they're total care, they might have things that feel bad. They could have tinnitus. They could have an earache. They could have a stomach ache or something. And their only way to tell you that is to slam their head into the wall. They don't want to slam their head into the wall, but they want the pain to stop, and maybe that distracts them. But if you just worry about stopping slamming their head in the wall, you're not focusing on what the problem is. And another thing that happens is you take them to the doctor, and the doctor goes, well, they're autistic. They do that. But no. If a child, if they have the occasional self-injurious episode, and then all of a sudden they're doing it almost constantly, something's going on. And you got to get them looked at. And if they can't tell you what's wrong, you got to get them looked at head to toe. And I know that's unpleasant. It's not going to be fun for them. But doctors don't want to take the time.
Yeah, that's true.
There was a young man named Creed, Creed's World, that's the YouTube channel. He died because doctors missed a genetic thing that they probably could have fixed. He died. He was non-speaking. He used an iPad to talk. And he died because, doctors would just look at the behavior and not look deeper. And he died. Bless his soul. I think he was 17. I'm not sure how old he'd be now because it was quite a few years ago. But, I never forgot Creed. He loved music. And he was okay with his mother recording him because he would have episodes of very rough behavior to see. But it's like, I felt that. And I was so upset when he died. I was just so pissed at the medical system because he shouldn't have died.
That's so sad.
It's all about money, right? And if they take that time to look at you stem to stern, they're not making that money. They want to push people through as fast as possible.
So I would like to visit a couple of comments that we have in the chat as well. Leo mentions emotions for neurodiverse individuals like us can be very complicated to where they either are non-existent or 100%. There is no middle ground, and that can be stressful even for the one experiencing.
Oh, yes.
And then Leo goes on to say, admiration is infatuation, agitation is anger, happiness is euphoria, indifference is disgust. It's either no emotion or the full emotion. It's shared similar with certain personality disorders. Interesting perspective for sure.
So what Leo just said about it shares a lot of traits with personality disorders. Like, if you will, the phenotype is similar, but what's happening underneath is not the same. And that was actually, I mentioned to you early, before we started the live stream, that, I could have used your advice 5 years ago. My partner and I were really struggling, right, with communication issues, which is all it was. It was just simple communication issues. And I thought he was narcissistic. I thought he had narcissistic personality disorder. You know, I thought he just didn't care and just wasn't listening to
Mhm.
me. And come to find out, it's just communication. We were just not meeting in the middle. And I don't even remember how we solved that. I think I watched a video or something and, you know, was like, oh, maybe that's the issue, right? Like, and we started communicating a little more directly, and that fixed so many things. Like,
Yeah, it's common,
yeah.
when you're a neurotypical and autistic person comes and you say something, tell a story about, oh, my dog died, I miss my dog. I might come and tell you, oh, I lost my dog in 2012 and it was a really tragic and sudden thing, and I'd go into the spiel about it, and a neurotypical would assume I'm making it about me, but it's like, no, I'm relating to you and
You're
I'm telling you
empathizing.
how I relate.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm so used to being misunderstood that I feel like I have to explain everything I say and do, because otherwise people ascribe some ulterior motive to my things, and maybe I just want
Right.
to say, hey, I care. But if I say that, they're like,
Right.
you're saying that for some reason, right? What do you want out of me? And it's like, I just came to say I care.
Yeah.
Like, when you're autistic, that everything is getting examined under a freaking microscope, and it's so frustrating.
The funniest thing he ever said to me, but the truest thing he ever said to me in the middle of an argument, I was like, what's that look on your face? What does that mean? Blah, blah, blah. He looked at me and he's like, you see this look on my face? There's nothing going on back there. I promise you. And it made us both laugh. And I started, and it broke the tension. Then also I was like, right, there's no subtext, Sherri. There's just text. Remember that. You know what I mean? Like, drop the subtext. There's only text.
Exactly. And the biggest struggle for me growing up is I was always punished for bad behavior, but the correct behavior was almost never modeled or explained to me. And from my perspective, I'm reading, so I'm sorry if my tone changed.
Oh, no, you're good.
I'm reading, but from my perspective, adults would just suddenly start yelling at me out of nowhere and getting angry. And it got to a point to where I thought, well, I'm going to get yelled at no matter what, so who cares? And I got labeled the bad kid and a brat, because of that. And, when I was in preschool, I would kick and throw sand at other kids and hit them because I was fascinated by how they'd all react differently. And it was just interesting to me. It didn't occur to me that I was hurting them. So no, don't explain that to me. They just be like, Cindy, you get in that corner right now. How dare you do that? Why did you do that? And I was just like, oh, I just wanted to see what would happen. We'd get in the corner. And I would ask why, and nobody explained it. And so, the autistic thing of feeling unheard, that discord I talked about, there it was. Because I was ignorant. I was left ignorant. And it was my grandma when I was 9 years old. 9 years old. One time I was talking about how I got in trouble in school again, and she's like, well, what'd you do? And I was like, hitting kids. So she grabbed my hand and she went, how's that feel? And I'm like, ow, that hurts. That was mean. Why'd you do that? And she's like, well, that's how you make other people feel when you hit them. And all of a sudden it made sense, and I quit doing it. I just need that one tiny minuscule bit of info that's this big. And nobody thought that maybe I was missing that. And I quit getting in trouble for hitting and kicking and biting and pushing people and stuff, because now I realize I'm hurting them. And, most autistic people, many of them like to know the why. Why is this expected of them? Why is this rule here? And a hugely frustrating thing is that we'll be mocked for asking why, or we're accused of being petulant, or we're ignored when we're trying to seek something that may be obvious to you, but it clearly isn't us. Like, if I've been rude and you're getting mad at me, I'm like, what did I do? I'm not trying to get out of it. I really don't know, and I want to know. But so many people go, you know what you did. You know what you said. You're just rude, and I don't want to talk to you anymore. And it's just, like I said, when I was a kid and I was getting bullied, and, the message was, well, what did you do to make these kids start teasing you? Stop being weird and they'll stop. And it's like, well, why are they making fun of me for being weird? Because you're weird. Stop being weird. And it's like,
way to victim blame.
Oh my God. Way to gaslight. Gosh.
Yeah, gaslight and victim blame.
Seriously, autistic people are gaslit all the time. And it gets to a point to now it's like I have to question things because like I might be hearing something that hurts and somebody else will be like, well, it's not that bad. It is to me.
Yeah.
That vacuum cleaner that our neighbor across the street is running in her house is killing me right now. Not literally, but like I'm like going like this, and they're like, I don't even hear it. And it's like neighbor's vacuuming. I hear it. It's an ice pick to my brain. Okay, let me plug my ears or put on my ear defenders until it stops. Because when it stops, I'm fine. But when it's going on, it's like, oh.
But see, it always comes down to minimizing, though. Like, people are always like, well, it's not that big of a deal. Or it's like you're people saying, oh, don't be over dramatic, things like that.
And the funny thing is that autistic people are expected to put themselves in neurotypical shoes, but neurotypicals are never expected to be in our shoes. So I am going to put you in my shoes right now. You ready to put my little shoes on?
Always.
I have big old feet. I'll try.
Okay, well, I'm size 5.5, so good luck.
It's gonna hurt. I'm doing it.
Being autistic is like navigating a video game that didn't come with the instruction manual that neurotypical people seem to be born with. So I'm going to break the rules. I'm going to go the wrong way in the dungeon. I'm going to push the wrong buttons because I have to figure out how it works by feel, when those are all the things that neurotypicals seem to know by rote. And people will yell at me for being a sucky team player instead of asking if I need help. But if you sit down with me and explain how the rules work, explain to me which button does what and why I need to do them and what do these tasks mean, and explain how the dungeon works, I'll probably do a lot better. And like, I'm not a gamer, but for some reason, game and computer analogies seem to make sense to people. So here's another one. Ever had a program or app stop responding and it crashes and you're pushing your buttons and you're swiping the screen? You're like, come on, go. What are you doing? And then boom, it's gone. It's off the screen. It crashes and it comes back up and it's working. That's a meltdown.
Yeah.
So it's like a program crashes. Boom.
Gotcha.
These comparisons are so thought-provoking. Like people need to hear that so much.
But in all seriousness, though, parents get really hostile when autistic advocates remind them that their children are human beings. Because I can understand the defensiveness of, I would never harm my child. How dare you imply that I am harming my child? But you can still hurt someone accidentally. And when parents react like that to autistic advocates, it feels like they just really don't give a crap about their kids and their well-being, because today's autistic adults have been through the abusive, like, applied behavioral analysis therapy that's like, quiet hands, look neurotypical, make eye contact, stare at me. And it's like, so.
Yeah.
And we don't want our kids to go through that. So.
Right. So actually, Leo makes an interesting point, which I think can be connected to what you just said. Most people equate the why with being questioned, in the sense you're questioning their authority. And I think that's why a lot of parents react that way too. Because a lot of them make the assumption, well, like, we're a parent, we know everything. We know what's best for our kids, right? However, like, if you're not taking into consideration neurodiversity and how to adjust your own behaviors to empathetically place yourself in their shoes, you don't really know everything about your kids and what's best for them. Like, you need to have that point of perspective, right?
Yeah, it's like you can know your kid's favorite color, their favorite food, their favorite TV character, whatever. But as an autistic person, I know what being autistic is like. And if you're neurotypical, you really can't really know it exactly, like all the internal nuances. And like another thing that's internal, this is a very internal part of autism, is that a lot of autistic people relate to the world through our special interests. And that's those things that we just seem to be experts in. That thing that, like, we have all kinds of merch for it, or something we talk about all the time. We talk about them because, they bring us joy and they bring us meaning, and making fun of them is like making fun of us for being who we are. And like, when you squash it, it's painful. It's like, try joining us in it instead. Ask us about it, because all of a sudden that person who never engages in conversation might all of a sudden have a million things to say. Like,
Well,
you know,
that's
like,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, honey, but you're speaking to my heart now, because this is a
mhm,
lot of how my partner and I connect. You know, he has his things that he, focuses on, and that are his things that he's into, and we have some overlap with those things. So anytime he comes to me with those things, I listen intently, because that might be the only time we've spoken today. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
he's trying to share that with me, and he's trying to share that thing with me. Why would I want to step on that? You know what I mean? Why would I want to crap on that? Like, I wouldn't, you know what I
exactly.
mean? Yeah, like, so thank you for saying that, because I've always kind of felt that in my heart, like this is his trying to reach out and connect. You know what I mean? This is how
Yeah.
he is communicating that to me. That's how I've always felt that was true. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah. And it's like, I have an astronomy example of, a way that I talk myself up when I'm feeling really low and feeling really crappy and really weak and just really pathetic, because I have days where I'm like that. And it's like,
Hmm.
I remember that stars are just giant nuclear explosions of plasma out in space. And like the supergiant star Betelgeuse, that's the red star in Orion.
Hmm.
Stars like that are fusing heavier and heavier elements in their cores, from hydrogen to helium and helium to carbon and nitrogen to oxygen until you get to iron. Now, iron absorbs more energy than it gives out. And so when a star that size gets to iron, it collapses into a supernova. And so in those few seconds, the hottest known temperatures are reached. So even new elements like gold are thrown out into space as nebulae to become new stars and planets. And think about how amazing that is. I mean, so how does this relate to iron? We have something in our blood that can murder stars. Okay.
Hmm.
So,
I
and
love
someday
that.
our sun will turn into a red giant and cool off into a white dwarf, a carbon and iron ball just floating in space because it's not mass enough to go supernova. So its outer layers will just kind of slough off into a planetary nebula, very beautiful. And
Mm.
of course, Earth is going to get swallowed up by it, but we're going to be long gone by then. But that nebula may someday form another star and other planets. And, the dust of who we were could be someone else's breath. We could be someone else's hair, their fingernails, we could be the air they're breathing. We could be the water they drink. And, our molecules will just go on and on. And, as a Catholic, I think that's part of God's plan because he made us from dust. Who said he's done? Who said he's done?
Mm.
So we can
That's
continue to being shaped by him out of dust.
that. I just. Oh, I'm having like this
A poetic,
supernova in my brain. Like my inner
poetic.
poet is like, I want to write 10 poems about this.
Oh, I could go on. Like, I wish
But
I could
that,
be here in about 7 billion years because the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxies are going to collide. And imagine what the sky's going to look like with all those nebula just forming and stars just going past each other and the cores just coming together and just into this one giant thing. It's a unition. That's not a word. It's a uniting of like just completely two huge, massive star cities. But I'm gonna stop it because if I keep
no,
talking about stars, I'll never stop.
no, I think like what you're saying clearly demonstrates just how connected things are,
Exactly.
right? Everything leads to something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like, I mean, if we think about the context of the relationship, especially between parents of autistic children and the actual children, like the small act of learning about those behaviors and placing yourself in those individual shoes, that can change so much for that person.
Mm-hmm.
That can change so much for that relationship dynamic, right? And
Exactly.
and I think that's itself is empowering, and the biggest obstacle that I think a lot of those people have to work through is this pride of like, well, I know best, right? Like we are all human beings capable of learning things. We don't always know best. There are situations where we should open ourselves to what other people have to give out so we can grow as a result of taking in that new information.
Mm-hmm. And another thing I want to make sure I say is that stop supporting Autism Speaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
No kidding.
This charity has done so much harm to autistic people. And I mean, there have been autistic people who've benefited from them. You know, I'm not going to like deny that, but Autism Speaks has a history of silencing autistic voices. They tried to get me banned off Facebook once for speaking out against them on one of their posts.
Mm.
And I got my account back. So
I
Good.
remember that. That was mind-boggling.
But this hateful charity, they opened in 2005 and they presented autism as the worst thing that can happen to a family by ignoring the child who is autistic in the narrative and focusing only on the parents whose entire lives will be ruined. And they had someone in on-camera interview state she wanted to drive off a bridge with her autistic child in the car while her autistic child was in the room.
I remember hearing about that.
She didn't do it because we're a neurotypical child.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of their donations go more to salaries and advertising and to research that's not going anywhere, instead of to families who could use like AAC devices, you know, alternative communication like iPads, you know, picture exchange cards, you know, stuff like that. And, you know, just respite care, you know, for individuals that need extensive support. You know, they could be helping with that, but instead they're trying to find out what caused autism, because the ultimate goal of Autism Speaks is to remove autism. You know, their message of acceptance that they've been trying to pretend to preach is, well, I tolerate you the way you are because I can't fix you. But as soon as I can fix you, you're not going to be acceptable anymore. That is what Autism Speaks is really saying. They changed their message from, excuse me, from cure to solutions. Well, gee, where have we heard solutions before? Wasn't it a guy with some kind of a toothbrush mustache? I don't want to say his name because, you know, that's he's a trigger, but
it comes directly out of the eugenics movement. You know, it comes directly out of that.
100%.
Exactly. Like everything Autism Speaks does is lip service and superficial, because their ultimate goal is the removal of autism. So if anyone out there is thinking, wait, Autism Speaks was nice to me in response to being informed of this, please remember that a person who beats their spouse is still an abuser who beats their spouse. Even if they let you go ahead of them in line at Starbucks, they're still an abuser.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Hannibal Lecter is still a cannibal, even if he gives you his coffee and says, please. You know, although he's not.
So we're low on time right now, and I have a proposal, because I think this is an amazing conversation, and I think that there should definitely be a part 2 where we talk about representation. Cindy, would you be interested in returning for that at some point? You don't have to answer now, but if you're interested, I would very much. I think we both would love to have you here again. But I think a great way to finish off this episode would be for you to talk about any good alternatives to Autism Speaks that help with education. Are there any ones that you want to suggest for people who might be listening?
Yeah, the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, ASAN, is one of them. And the Autism Women and Non-Binary Network, so AWNN. So those are 2 of their autistic-led charities. And, you know, they participate in the Red Instead. You know, Red Instead is like the counterpoint to Light It Up Blue. So you see a lot of autistic people in red and some in gold, because some do Light It Up Gold. So there's red and gold. You know, those are the colors to support autistic people in April instead of blue. I'm wearing pink, so I'm not a very good messenger of, you know, red, but pink is close to red. I've got red behind me.
I mean, in the lighting, it looks kind of red to me. Granted, I am kind of colorblind, so.
So I have an art degree. I forgive you the pink. It is red.
Oh,
there you go.
I know it is looking red on camera.
Oh my goodness. So Cindy, the one last thing that I would like to ask you would be, what advice do you have for people in the autistic community who might be struggling?
Well, you are who you are, and who you are is not wrong. And if people are being bullies to you, if people are being cruel to you, if people are telling you that you can't be who you are even bigger and be louder about it. You know, even, especially if you're, LGBTQIA plus, if you're queer, whatever. I'm asexual, and, I'm loud about it sometimes, but if you're gay, and like, if you have to be in the closet for your safety, if you're gay, trans, whatever, be safe first and foremost. But when it's okay and you can come out, be yourself. And if it's safe to be yourself online, be yourself online. But don't listen to those bullies, because your life is so important. And I care that you're here. I'm glad that you're here. I'm happy you're here. I want you to stay here, because someday you might be sitting here listening to these two very cool people talk. You might be on their show someday. And I'd like to see you. And I would be sad if something happened to you, because you're special. You're important. And there's nobody like you. There is nobody like you.
That was like the perfect way to finish this off.
I got nothing else. Yeah.
So I mic drop, Cindy. Mic drop. Yeah. So, of course, tune in again next Thursday, my friends. But in the meantime, if you would like to check out Cindy's YouTube channel, Cindy goes by Streamofawareness. I have links down in the description section of this video. Go check out Sherri's channel, Sherri Makes Stuff. Check out Ari's channel, Strange Nothings. And of course, if you're here and you've not subscribed to mine yet, well, what are you doing? Right?
Just silly.
Right. So anyway, thank you, Cindy, for joining us again. For the first time, I mean. Thank you for joining us. And have a wonderful rest of your night, everyone. Love you.
Bye.
Mwah.
Bye.